What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 22 of the How to Code a Spigot plugin for 1.15 series. Today's episode's all about particles. We're going to learn everything about them. And we're actually going to make two episodes about particles. One episode is about creating particles with packets, and then the other is without. And today's episode is without. So we're going to create this particle effect. We're actually going to create two different particle effects. So what the plugin does is we're call this command /trails. And what it does is it opens up this custom GUI, and we have a bunch of different trails in here that we can use. We're only going to code two of these trails today. The first one is, of course, the one that you see right here. And the second one is going to be this magic trail. This magic trail is a bit different, and it's only going to activate when we move. So when we move, it activates these particles. And, oops, sorry, server's a bit laggy. When we move, activate these particles, and then if we stop moving, it goes away. And it's a little different from this one, where it actually just is on all the time. Now, this actual pattern, I went over in a past episode before, and it's a pretty popular pattern. It's seen on Hypixel and Mineplex and all those big servers. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first thing I did was I actually went ahead and I created all the packages and classes that we will need for this project. I'll go ahead and zoom in for you guys. Go ahead and pause the video. If you're following along, go ahead and create the packages and classes that you will need for this project. We're going to need 4 different packages, and it looks like 8 different files. I also went ahead and created that plugin.yml. So the first thing we want to do is go into we'll do our trails class first. So this is going to be our command class, and we want to do implements command executor at the top. And really, this class is implements command executor. So what this class is, it's obviously just the command class. So when we issue the command /trails, it's going to open up GUI. So it's going to be a very, very basic command. So the command, of course, is going to be a public boolean on command. Have the command sender. Let's name it sender. The command, I want to name it cmd, and string label, as well as a string array. So like I said, to be a really basic command, all we're going to put in here, return false. We're going to say if the label dot equals ignore case trails. So if they're running the command trails, first thing you want to check for is see if the sender is not a player. So if an instance of player, so if it's not an instance of player, go ahead and return true. And you could send a message to the console. We can go ahead and do send message. You cannot do this. So if the console runs this command /trails, go ahead, just return true, kick them out, and say you cannot do this. But now that we know that the person running this command is a player, we can go ahead and create that player equals a cast of player to the sender. And like I said, this is going to be a very basic command, because all we're going to do next is open that GUI. But we don't have a GUI yet. So let's go ahead, and once this is done, go ahead into your GUI class. It will be found in the models package. So for our GUI, this is all very custom. You can do whatever you want in here. The first thing I want to do, though, is create a private static inventory. I'm going to call it INV for inventory. We're going to use this inventory right here to compare what inventory the player is in. So if they're in this inventory, let's check if it equals this. If it equals that, then that means they're in our inventory. That's the only reason why I'm going to use this. And then next, I'm going to say public void register. And we're also going to need 3 other methods: a public inventory, get inventory, and that of course is going to return the inv, as well as a private void set inventory, instead of taking an inventory inv, and whoops, sorry, I messed up there. And what it's going to do is set capitalize inv equal to lowercase inv. So let's set the static inventory equal to the inventory that we're passing in. Then finally, we're going to need a public void open inventory. And you can guess what that one does. It just takes in a player and it does player.open inventory. We're going to pass in that static inv. All right. So what goes in this register? The register is really up to you guys of what you want it to look like. This is the whole concept of the slash trails. This is what my inventory looks like in this part. I mean, it's like I said, it's all custom. You can do whatever you want, and we're gonna throw in two things in there because that's the only particles that I'm gonna show you guys in this episode. So we'll create an inventory, call it inv, and we'll say bucket.create inventory. We need to pass in a null because we don't care about the owner to be like a public one. Pass in the size, and the size must be in intervals of 9. So we're gonna pass in just a 1-row inventory, which is 9, and then the title. For the title, I'm just going to do check color dot aqua plus check color dot bolds, and then I'm going to say trails GUI. So once we have the inventory, we can go ahead and start creating some items. The first item I'm going to create is that totem. And then for the also, I'm gonna create a item meta so we can make it look a little nicer. Set equal to item.getMeta. And go ahead and make sure you're importing everything. And once we, sorry, let me zoom in for you guys. My bad. So once we have this item created, we can go ahead and make a little custom. So meta.set display name to yellow. We can say totem trail, and then item dot set meta, set item meta to meta, and then finally we're going to type in inv dot set item, and we're going to set it 0 1 2 3 4. So let's set it at 3. So if you didn't see what I did there, is the GUIs are array based, so it starts at 0, and if row 1 will end at 8, so 0 through 8. So once we have created the first item, I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, go down, paste it, and I'm gonna get rid of this declaring, and then instead of item of undying, we're gonna say we can change it up from the example I did. So I don't know, let's say campfire, and then this trail will be the fire trail. We'll change it up a little bit instead of the magic, and then we'll do red. And instead of 3, it's going to be 5. And then once we're done with all the items, you type in set inventory inv. So like I said, the main point of this episode is to learn the particles, so that GUI and stuff isn't important. You guys can customize how how many you want, and then once you customize it, make sure you're setting the inventory to that static inventory up here. And then that's all we're going to see of this class. So once that class is done, we can actually go into actually making the particles. And before we do that, why not we just open the inventory? So GUI GUI equals a new GUI. And just so you guys aren't confused, just in case, I'll rename this to menu, and we're going to say menu dot open inventory player, and then return true. So our command class is done, because all it's going to do is open that inventory. Get it out of there. So we created our GUI, we created our command. Let's go ahead and create that actual particle. So I'm in the particles data file now. And inside of here, we're going to need a few things. This class, the point of this class is it's going to hold all of the data for every single kind of particle, for every player. So a player is going to have their name, and next to their name, they're going to have this item like ID, this particle ID. And the ID corresponds to the runnable. So if we get that ID, we can cancel the runnable or we can start a runnable. Make a little more sense as I go on. So we're going to create a private static, and of course we're going to need a hash map. Create this hash map called trails. Once we create that hash map, go ahead, let's create one more thing, a private final UUID. And you're going to get a little red underline there, and that's because we need a constructor. And our constructor needs to have a UUID getting passed through it, so we can set this UUID equal to the UUID. So we're setting this UUID from this class right here equal to this UUID. Alright, so once we have the constructor in there, we can go ahead and pop in the methods that we need. So we're going to need a public void set ID, int ID, and this is going to do a trails.put, and it's going to put the UID as well as the ID inside the class. So like I said, this class really is just a manager. It's just going to manage our trails for players. So if a player already has an ID, that means they already have a trail on. Then we're just going to get that, cancel that trail, and then put the new one on. So it's pretty much, it's just a class to manage this hash map. And if you're watching my other videos, you should be decent at hash maps. Now, I might not be as good as I am. I use hash maps in every single plugin, but you'll get there. Hash maps are so useful. All right, the next method. So we have a set ID. We also need a public int get ID. So we need to get that ID. And of course, this is going to return the trails dot get, and we're going to get from the UID. So the reason why I can just get UID is because we pass it in with our constructor. So when we call this class, we're passing in a UID, and it's being set right here. So I'm able to use it in all these different methods. Next one we need is a public boolean has ID. And this is going to check if our hash map contains a UID. And if it does, let's return true. If it doesn't, return false. So if our trails has some sort of value in the UID that we're passing in, return true. Otherwise, return false, because it means it has no value in here. Next, we're going to need, of course, a public void remove ID. And you guys can probably guess it. So do trails dot remove UID. So remove that value. And then we're going to create two more things here. This one's very important. It's going to be public void end task. And this is what I was talking about, the task. So if you have a runnable runs on this task ID, and you can actually cancel that specific task ID. So instead of canceling every single task on your server, you can just cancel one task. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. So we're going to cancel one task. But we're doing something a little tricky here. I'm actually going to say inside of here, I'm going to say if get ID equals 1, return. And this is for the actual movement. And I'll explain more in a second. But if the ID equals 1, return. Otherwise, we're going to say bucket.getScheduler.cancel task. And the task is get ID. All right. So, and the last method we'll need is this. This is what this 1 means. It's going to be a fake ID. So public static boolean has fake ID, UID, and this will be a static method. And I'll explain why once we get to that movement event coming up. UID, and we're going to say if the trails.get contain UID, if that equals 1, then return true. Otherwise, let's just return false. So when we create this trail, when I call this trail right here, it starts a runnable, a bucket runnable. And this runnable is running non-stop. It's running non-stop until I put on another trail. And when I put on that other trail, what it does is it's gonna stop, it's gonna end task, and the ID is never 1. It's gonna end the task, and it's gonna right here, it's gonna cancel that task. What if it is 1? It is only 1 when I set it 1. So that's what the fake ID is. And when it's a 1, that means, in our plugin, it means we have a movement trail on. So if we have a movement trail on, that's what 1 means. So it's kind of it's a fake ID. It's something that I'm setting to make my plugin work a little easier and better. So now that our particle data class is done, let's move on to the actual click class, click event. And this is where we click on the GUI and something happens. So the first thing we need to do is call a private GUI, and let's call it menu. So we're gonna get that GUI class. Also create a constructor, and inside the constructor, we're just initializing that GUI class. We're saying menu equal a new GUI. Go ahead and import GUI and make sure it's the import of your GUI. Next, we're to say event handler public void on click, and we're passing in that inventory click event. Furthermore, make sure you implement listener at the top. All right, once you have everything imported, the first thing we want to do is say if the event.get inventory doesn't equal menu.get inventory, return. So what I'm saying here is if the inventory that the person clicked in doesn't equal the menu.get inventory, then kick them out. We don't care about them. We only care about the people that are inside our GUI. And this menu.get inventory corresponds to our GUI class, of where we have this inventory as a static method, as a static kind of data type, I should say. So once we know that they're inside our inventory, we can go ahead and create that player equals the cast of a player to event.get who clicked, and then we're saying event.set canceled. So it's going to cancel the event so players cannot take items out of the inventory. The next really important thing you want to do is say if event.getView.getType .get type equals inventory type dot player, return. So if the type of the inventory that the player is clicking in is the player's inventory, return. We don't care about them. So that is basically when I type in /trails, if they're clicking somewhere in here, if they're trying to move around things, move it into here or something like that, return. We don't want them to do anything in there, and that's why we set this cancel before it. We only care if they're clicking in our GUI, which is only up here. So it's really important that you put that in. And then finally, we can say particle data particle equals a new particle data player.get unique ID. So we're going into this class we just created. We just created this particle data class. So we'll go ahead and we'll create an instance of it, and what we're going to say is if particle that has ID, then we're going to say particle dot end task, as well as particle dot remove ID. So this is what I was talking about. So if they have some sort of value in this hash map that we created in the particle data class, if they have a value in here, that means they have a trail going on. That means they have some sort of trail activated. So if they do, let's end that task. And even if it's a movement, we don't care because we have a check in there to say if it's equal to 1, return. So nothing will break. And then finally remove that ID. If they don't have a task, if they don't have an ID, doesn't matter. That's why it's inside this if statement. And then after this if statement, we can say, oh, we didn't create this class yet. So let's go ahead and create this next class where we actually do the trails and stuff. And that class is going to be the effects class. So this class is pretty simple. Like I said earlier, I'm actually just going over the same exact trail that I did in a very old video for my 1.14 series. And that's because it's a really popular trail and it's super easy for me because I already have the code. When you're making trails, one thing you gotta know is it's all math. It's all dealing with sines and cosines and for loops and stuff like that. So what you could do is Google search some like for loops that create triangles, that create wings in some sort of way with dots or whatever, and then replace the system.out with dot and replace that with a spawning particle, and the particle will spawn in that sort of manner. So I created this private int task ID as well as a private final player. I went ahead and also created the constructor. We're passing in a player, saying it player because this is a final, so we have to call it in on the constructor. This class will only have one method for now. I mean, if you want to add more trails, you could probably have more methods in here, but the only trail that we're going to have that's continuous is this start totem trail. And it's going to take a task ID, so we're setting task ID equal to bucket.getScheduler .schedule repeated task. Sync repeated task. And then first argument main.getPlugin.main.class. And then delete this, comma, new runnable. And then we're going to say open curly brace and then just press enter. And then at the end, we need to say inside the curly brace and the regular parentheses, type in comma 0, comma 1, semicolon. Now you could use a different kind of runnable. I mean, it's all up to you what runnable you use. I'm just going to use this one for now. You're going to already get this little red underline, and you will need to add unimplemented methods. It's going to add in this run method. So what I have in here is when we call this method right here, it's going to start instantly. It's going to start 0 ticks. So these are based on ticks. So there's 20 ticks in 1 second. So if you want this to run every second, it'll be 20 right there. I don't want it to run every second. I want it to run every 1 tick. And that's just because it's a bit faster. You guys can play around with it. 5 ticks, whatever. When I was testing out the plugin, I put in 20, and every second it kind of was too slow. So I'm going to put in 1 for now. And then so we're going to do a few different things here. And runnables can be a bit laggy when you create them. So we tend to want to try to create everything above the runnable and only just change things inside the actual loop. So above here, like I said, we're going to create these things. We're going to create a double var, and we'll set it equal to 0. We're going to create a location called log. We're also going to create another location called first and another one called second. Go ahead and import location. So I'm creating 3 different locations: location, first, and second. I'm also going to create a particle data. Particle set equal to a new particle data player.get unique ID. And that's everything that we're going to put above. So like I said, we want to create things above the loop. Inside the loop, we just want to modify things. And this is to better help with the lag, because runnables do create lag. It will create way less lag if you just modify things inside the loop. So moving on. The first thing we want to say is if the particle that has ID. So if the particle doesn't have an ID, which I put the exclamation point there for, if it doesn't have an ID, let's say particle dot set ID to task ID. So this is the whole concept of what I was talking about, the task ID. So we're setting this task ID to inside of our hash map. The task ID refers to this runnable. And like I said earlier, we're doing this so we can eventually cancel the task. So when they're switching trails, we can cancel it. Or when the player leaves, whenever the player leaves, we can cancel that trail so it doesn't cause any errors. So that's what we need to do. The first thing you do with the runnable, if it doesn't have an ID, go ahead and set an ID. Next, there's going to be a little math involved here. We're going to say plus equals math.py, and we're going to divide that by 16. Next, we're going to say loc equals player.getLocation. And we need to set it inside here and not up here because the location changes frequently. So we're going to set it, we're going to get their new location. So we're getting their new location each time it runs. And we're setting it to loc, and we're saying first equals loc.clone. So we're cloning this location, and we're going to add some value to it. We're going to add value to each different x, y, and z. And the value you want to add to the x is a math.cosine var. To the y, we want to add math.sine var +1. And then math.sine var done. Really important, make sure you're not doing a cosine, a sine, a sine. It's just cosine, sine, sine. And var is referring to this double up here that gets affected by math.py divided by 16 each time the loop goes. The next location is the second one, sorry. And we're going to do the same thing, we're going to clone it, and we're going to add some value to it. We're adding in that math.cosine var plus math.py, and then for the y, we're adding in math.sine var +1 math.sine again of var plus math.py. Finally, we are done with all that math and sines and cosines. And we're just going to set those locations now. We're going to say player.getWorld, and this is how you spawn a particle. So we're getting the world, and we're doing .spawnParticle. We're spawning the particle of totem to the first location. All these other arguments we do not care about. Just go ahead and put a 0 right there. And then we're doing one more time, and we're saying instead of first, second. So there's actually 3 different ways to spawn particles. Kind of lied. There's the main way, the right way people want you to do it is through packets, which I will go a video over that soon. This way is a really good way of doing it. This is kind of a new API kind of way. This is a good way of doing it. You can spawn a particle to the world, which every single player will see. Or you can spawn a particle only to that player. Just get rid of the world. So you can do this. Spawn particle to just that player. But we're going to do it to the world so every single player can see this. Now, as for the math part, like I said, each trail is, if you want like a cool different pattern, it has to deal with math, and it's usually sines and cosines, because the sines and cosines have the nice little slope to it. You will have to figure these out for yourselves, of course, but this is a really nice trail right here. And this is all we need to do. So this class is done. Once this class is done, go ahead back into that click event and we can finish up our GUI here. We can say effects trails equals a new effects of player. So we're creating that trails, we're creating an instance of that effects class, and we're going to go through every single slot. So get slot case 0. And I think we actually, case 3, break. Case 5, break. And default, we'll just put in a break there. So what I did here was I'm putting event.getSlot into the switch statement. So whatever slot they're clicking on, it's going to go into this switch statement. And then you can go ahead and deal with each case. We just have 2 cases here, so case 3 and 5 corresponds to the slot number, corresponds to 0. So case 3, we're going to open up that trails.start totem. We're also going to say player.close inventory as well as player.update inventory. And just like that, we can go ahead and export this program and it'll work. In our main class, we will need to initialize some things. And of course, that is the GUI menu equals a new GUI menu.register. So that right there is going to create our inventory. So we have this register method in our GUI class that's going to create that inventory. And then next, what we want to say is plugin manager PM equals this .get server .get plugin manager. And then we're to say pm.register events. So I'm just registering the events from our click class, click event, and I'm going to pass in this. And then similarly, I'm actually going to do this .get command. I'm saying trails.set executor to a new trail. Go ahead and import that. So in our main class, we're creating this GUI, and we're also going to be calling this event and the command. So we're setting everything up. And then we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and export this to my server. Let's see if it works. Trails. All right. So our command is trails. I hope my other plugin doesn't break it. Let's see. So command is trails. Here's our GUI that we created, the custom name, the custom items. So if we click totem, hopefully this works. It doesn't work. Oh, it did work. My server is just a bit laggy. All right, so it did work. When we clicked the totem, it popped up. If we click it again, nothing will break because it does cancel that second event and then goes again. If we click this campfire, however, the campfire will just get rid of the trail. That's because our campfire doesn't have a trail yet. But if we click the totem, this totem effect does happen. And I'm sorry, my server is a bit laggy because I'm running the stream and everything on it. So next, we need to do the actual movement one, and time is kind of running pretty late. We're at 34 minutes. So I just want to go over this real fast. And what we're going to need to do is first, before we do anything, go into the quit event, and we're going to create this implements listener. And we're going to say public void on quit player quit event. And what we're going to say in here, we're going to create that particle data. We'll call it P, we'll set equal to a new particle data, pass in the event dot get player dot get UID. So I'm creating the instance of this class we created, and I'm saying if P p.hasID, then we need to do p.endtask. This is really important. And so if someone leaves the server, if I leave the server right now, the plugin will break. The plugin will break if I leave the server. Oh, okay. I can't even join because the dang Minecraft worked. But if you leave the server and join back, you'll notice that the trail is going to keep going in that same area, but it won't follow you. So you need to add this in to your quit event, and we can go ahead and initialize it in our main class. And then finally, we can go ahead and create that movement. So in the movement class, we can say implements listener. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this code in here for you guys because I don't want my videos to run more than 40 minutes. Sorry. I didn't want to make this video 2 parts because the movement particle is actually kind of lame. So I'm just going to copy and paste this in here, and I'm just going to explain it to you guys. We're going to create this movement class, and we're checking if it's a fake ID. So this is our method that we did earlier. This is our hasFakeID method, and it's checking if it's a 1. So the whole point of this is to say if it isn't 1, if we don't have a fake ID, return. We don't care about them. But if they do have a fake ID, let's go ahead and spawn some particles. Now I put the particle spawning into this for loop just so it spawns this cool little effect, I guess, and it does it randomly. So each time you walk, it spawns random. And I pasted this in here because it's super easy. It's the same thing we did in the effects class where we'd spawn the particle, but instead we're spawning it in a different random way. And once you have the code in there for the movement, you can go ahead and register it on your main class, and the plugin is done. Oh, I'm sorry. And then we also need to go in the GUI class, the click event. And then once in the click event, and you go into this 5th one, we can copy in these 2 because all we're going to say in case 5, all we're going to say is particle .set ID to 1. And now we're done. So I went a little bit fast because I wanted to try to get everything done under 40 minutes, and we're getting pretty dang close to it. And because I wanted to show you guys the whole GUI, I didn't want to make 2 parts over the movement one because the movement one, like I said, is pretty lame and just goes over some basic spawning. So if after coding this whole thing, you guys should be pretty good at spawning particles. Spawning particles when the player moves, spawning particles when as a runnable. And you can also do stuff as like when a player places a block down, spawn a particle. It's just a simple method, spawn particle. Spawn that particle, you can put it in a for loop so it spawns 5 times and it looks pretty nice. Particles are super easy. They're all inside of this particle dot, and if you did particle dot, you can see there's a bunch of different particles. One thing I do have to say though is in the effects class we use the in the effects class we use the totem particle. And it's really important. The totem particle is a API 1.15 or maybe 1.14. I forget when the totem came out. But make sure your API version is updated so you can use the correct particles. If you want to use particles that are only 1.15, make sure you have the 1.15 API version. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. All the code for this will be in the GitHub for patrons, only $3 a month, and you get code to every single video. Also, please go ahead, like, subscribe. We're on the road to 1K subscribers. We're almost there. We're getting close. Go ahead and check out the description for some more links to my Twitch and Discord. Go ahead and join the community. We have an awesome community on Discord. You can ask questions. Everyone's a learner on there, so no one's going to make fun of you for asking questions. Believe me, we're not the Spigot forums. Go ahead, ask any questions you want. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much.